The billionaire was still a virgin at 40, until a lonely poor woman asked to stay in his house during a heavy rainstorm. What happened next? No one could imagine. A truly powerful story awaits you. But before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. I love and respect Mr. Peter. Now let's start this beautiful journey filled with love and emotion. Some promises are meant to be broken, but Mike Wilson spent 15 years learning that keeping them could destroy what little remained of his heart. The storm arrived without warning, the way grief had arrived without warning 15 years ago, when Catherine whispered her final breath against his chest and left him alone in a world that suddenly made no sense. Mike Wilson stood at the window of his estate, watching lightning tear across the Virginia sky, his reflection ghostly in the glass. He was a man who had everything except the only thing that mattered. His empire stretched across continents. His wealth could buy anything except time. And his bed had remained empty since the night he made 2 promises to a dying woman: that he would never marry anyone else, and that he would honor her memory by living the life she could not. But Catherine had whispered with her final words that he would find someone better, someone who deserved the love he was locking away. Mike had dismissed it as the morphine talking, as the desperate hope of a woman who loved him too much to want him suffering alone. 15 years later, he stood in the estate they had planned to fill with children, surrounded by staff who moved through the halls like ghosts, maintaining a museum to memories that grew heavier with each passing year. The headlights cutting through the rain revealed her before he consciously registered, driving toward the gates. Mike had left his office in the city hours ago, unable to focus on reports and projections when the anniversary of Catherine's death loomed 2 days away. He drove on instinct, his hands steering toward the only home he had ever really known, and nearly missed the figure collapsed against the iron gates. She was soaked through, her dark skin glistening with rain, her natural hair plastered against her face in thick curls that dripped water down her neck. When his headlights illuminated her, she looked up with eyes that stopped his heart cold. Amber, the exact shade of autumn leaves catching sunlight, the exact shade that haunted his dreams. Mike was out of the car before rational thought caught up with instinct. "Are you hurt?" She tried to stand, but her legs gave out, and he caught her before she hit the ground again. Up close, she was shaking violently, her lips taking on a bluish tint that spoke of how long she had been out in this weather. Her clothes were cheap and worn, soaked through to reveal a body that was too thin, as if she had been forgetting to eat for longer than just tonight. "Please," she managed through chattering teeth. "I just need somewhere to wait out the storm. I'll leave when it stops. I promise I'll leave." Something in those words, the desperate promise, the assumption that kindness would be temporary, cracked something in Mike's chest that had been sealed shut for 15 years. He lifted her without asking permission, surprised by how light she was, how she curled instinctively into his warmth despite being a stranger. She smelled like rain and desperation, and something underneath that was uniquely her, something that made his arms tighten protectively. "You're coming inside," he said, carrying her toward the estate as rain pounded against them both. "I don't have money," she whispered against his shoulder. "I can't pay you." "I'm not asking you to." The front door opened before he reached it. Margot standing there, with the expression of a woman who had been with him long enough to read his moods and his needs. She took one look at the woman in his arms and disappeared, returning moments later with blankets and towels. "Guest room," Margot said, her voice brooking no argument. "Hot shower, dry clothes, and soup. We'll discuss everything else after she's warm." Mike carried the woman up the curved staircase, through halls lined with portraits and memories, to the guest wing he had not opened in years. Margot had already turned on the shower, steam pouring from the bathroom in welcoming clouds. He set the woman on the bed gently, and she looked around the room with an expression that suggested she had never been anywhere this beautiful. "Thank you," she said, her voice steadier now but still threaded with exhaustion. "I'm Robbie Shine." "Mike Wilson." He pulled a blanket around her shoulders. Take your time in the shower. Margot will bring clothes and food. We'll talk when you're ready. He should have left then. Should have closed the door and walked away and maintained the distance he had perfected over 15 years. Instead, he stood there watching water drip from her hair onto the expensive carpet, watching her amber eyes study his face with an intensity that suggested she was memorizing him. "Why are you helping me?" Robbie asked. Mike considered lying, considered giving her an answer about basic human decency or Christian charity or any of the socially acceptable reasons for not leaving someone to die of exposure. Instead, he told her the truth. Because 15 years ago I made a promise to someone that I would live the life she couldn't, and I've been breaking that promise every single day since. Maybe this is how I start keeping it. Robbie's eyes filled with tears that had nothing to do with rain. Whoever she was, she loved you very much to ask that of you. Yes, she did. Mike moved toward the door, needing distance before he said something he could not take back. "Get warm, Robbie Shine. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest." He made it halfway down the hall before his legs gave out, and he sat on the floor with his back against the wall, breathing hard. Margot found him there 20 minutes later. "She's in the shower," Margot said, sitting beside him with the ease of someone who had known him since childhood. "She'll be all right. But you won't be if you don't talk about what you're feeling." "I don't know what I'm feeling," Mike admitted. I looked at her, and for a second I thought. He stopped, unable to finish. "You thought you were seeing Catherine," Margot finished gently. "The eyes, it's more than the eyes. It's something about her. The way she moves, the way she talks. I know it's impossible. I know I'm projecting. But Margot, when I picked her up, I felt something I haven't felt since Catherine died." Mike nodded, not trusting his voice. Margot squeezed his hand. "Maybe that's not projection. Maybe that's your heart remembering how to feel." Mike wanted to argue, wanted to insist that what he felt was grief playing tricks. But he could not shake the image of Robbie looking up at him in the rain. Those amber eyes holding storms he recognized, because he had been living in one for 15 years. He stayed in the hallway for another hour, telling himself he was waiting to make sure she did not need anything else, knowing deep down that he was simply afraid to walk away. When he finally returned to his own room, sleep remained elusive. He kept seeing her face, kept hearing her voice promising she would leave, kept feeling the way she had curled into his warmth as if his body was a safe harbor she had been searching for through a very long storm. At 3 a.m, Mike gave up on sleep and went downstairs to his study, intending to lose himself in work the way he had lost himself every night for 15 years. Instead, he found himself staring at Catherine's portrait above the fireplace, the painting that had watched over him through countless lonely nights. "I don't know what this is," he told the portrait. "I don't know if I'm losing my mind or if you sent her to me or if this is just coincidence. But she's here, and I can't stop thinking about her, and I'm scared of what that means." Catherine's painted smile held no answers, but Mike could hear her voice in his memory. "Promise me you'll find someone better. Promise me you'll let yourself be happy." He had spent 15 years refusing to believe such a promise could be kept. But Robbie Shine was asleep upstairs in his guest room, and for the first time since Catherine died, Mike Wilson felt something other than the hollow ache of grief. He felt possibility. Dawn broke grey and wet, the storm having settled into steady rain that showed no signs of stopping. Mike showered and dressed, telling himself he was simply being a good host, that checking on their unexpected guest was basic hospitality. He found Margot already in the kitchen, preparing enough breakfast for a small army. "She's awake," Margot said without looking up. "I heard water running in her bathroom an hour ago." "She's scared, Mike. Whatever she's running from, it's bad." Mike's hands clenched involuntarily. "Did she say something?" "She didn't have to. I've seen that look before. That's the look of someone who thinks safety is temporary and danger is inevitable." Margot finally met his eyes. "Be careful, not because she's dangerous to you, but because you're already in too deep and you've known her less than 12 hours. I know. Do you? Because I saw your face when you carried her inside. That was not the face of a man offering temporary shelter. That was the face of a man who found something he didn't know he was looking for. Before Mike could respond, soft footsteps on the stairs announced Robbie's arrival. She appeared in the doorway, wearing clothes Margot had left for her, simple jeans and a sweater that hung loose on her thin frame. Her hair pulled back in a bun that revealed the elegant line of her neck. Without makeup and rain-destroyed clothes, she looked younger and infinitely more vulnerable. "Good morning," she said, her voice uncertain. "I can leave now if you want. The rain isn't as bad as last night." "Sit," Mike said, pulling out a chair at the kitchen table. "You're not going anywhere until you've eaten and we've talked." Robbie hesitated, and Mike saw the exact moment she decided to trust him, the way her shoulders relaxed fractionally, and she moved to the chair he had pulled out. Margot set a plate, in front of her loaded with eggs and toast and fresh fruit, and Robbie stared at it like she had not seen real food in a very long time. "Eat," Margot ordered gently. "Then talk. That's how we do things in this house." Mike poured coffee while Robbie ate with the careful manners of someone who had been taught proper etiquette but had not practiced it in a while. He watched her, hands shake slightly as she lifted the cup, watched her close her eyes in pleasure at the first sip, watched her systematically clean her plate despite clearly being unused to eating full meals. When she finished, she folded her hands in her lap and looked at him directly, and Mike saw the steel underneath the vulnerability. This was not a woman who had been broken by whatever circumstances brought her to his gates. This was a woman who had been bent but refused to stay down. "I have twin sons," Robbie said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Austin and Matthew, they're with my sister 3 states away. I left them there because my ex-husband said he would take them from me if I didn't sign papers giving up my rights. I came here because I had nowhere else to go and no money and no plan except to keep moving until I figured out what to do next." Mike's coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. "How old?" "The twins. Young enough to need their mother. Old enough to remember if I disappear." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I know how this sounds. I know you think I'm a terrible mother for leaving them, but I was out of options, and I thought if I could just get somewhere safe, somewhere he couldn't find me, I could figure out how to fight for them properly." "What's his name?" Mike asked quietly. Callahan Bright." Robbie's hands clenched in her lap. "He's not a bad man in the ways people think of bad men. He never hit me, never left marks, but he took away every piece of myself until I couldn't remember who I was before I met him. And when I finally left, he threatened the only thing that could make me come back." Mike set down his cup carefully, his mind already working through possibilities and resources and solutions. "Tell me everything, from the beginning, and then we'll figure out how to get your sons back." Robbie's eyes widened. "You don't even know me. Why would you help?" "Because 15 years ago, I made a promise. And because you showed up at my gates in the middle of a storm and reminded me what it feels like to want to fight for something again." Mike reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers, offering contact without demanding it. "Because I have resources you need, and you have something I lost a very long time ago." "What's that?" "A reason to use them for something that matters." Robbie's hand moved to meet his, her fingers sliding between his with a trust that felt sacred and terrifying in equal measure. Her skin was warm now, no longer cold from rain and exposure, and Mike felt that touch travel up his arm and settle directly in the center of his chest, where his heart had been dormant for 15 years. "I'm falling apart," she whispered. "I'm barely holding myself together. You don't want this kind of broken in your life." "Maybe I do," Mike said. "Maybe I've been broken for so long that I forgot what it feels like to care about fixing something." Maybe you didn't end up at my gates by accident." Robbie's amber eyes searched his face, looking for lies or ulterior motives, or all the things that Callahan had taught her to expect from people who offered help. Mike let her look, let her see whatever she needed to see, and finally she nodded. "Okay, I'll tell you everything. But Mike—" She gripped his hand tighter. "I come with complications. I come with baggage and trauma and 2 little boys who need stability. I can't give them right now. If you're going to help, you need to know what you're signing up for." "Tell me," Mike said simply. And she did. For the next 2 hours, Robbie laid out her story with the precision of someone who had lived every painful moment. She talked about meeting Callahan when she was barely more than a girl, about how his attention felt like love until it became a cage. She described the slow erosion of her independence, the way he controlled money and friends, and every decision until she could not remember how to make choices without his approval. She explained how she got pregnant despite his objections, how he had insisted she terminate but she refused, how he punished that refusal in 1,000 small ways that left no evidence except the damage to her spirit. She told him about finally leaving, about taking the twins and running to her sister Isla's apartment with nothing but a bag of clothes and determination. She described Callahan's threats, his lawyers, his systematic destruction of any support system she tried to build. And she admitted, her voice breaking, that she was terrified he would win because he had money and power and she had nothing except love for her sons. Mike listened without interrupting, his hand never leaving hers, his coffee going cold and forgotten. When she finally fell silent, tears streaming down her face, he did the only thing that felt right. He stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried out years of pain and fear and exhaustion. "You're not alone anymore," he said against her hair. "And your sons are coming home, to you, to here, whatever it takes, Robbie, whatever it takes." She looked up at him with hope and disbelief tangled together. "You can't mean that." "I never say things I don't mean." Mike wiped tears from her cheeks with his thumbs, the gesture intimate and natural in a way that should have scared him but didn't. "I'm going to make some calls. You're going to stay here. And by the end of the week, Austin and Matthew will be sleeping under this roof with their mother where they belong." "Why?" she asked again, desperate to understand. "Why would you do this for me?" Mike looked into those amber eyes that reminded him of everything he had lost and everything he might still find, and told her the truth he was only beginning to understand himself. "Because I've been dead for 15 years, and you walked into my life and made me remember what it feels like to be alive." Chapter 2. The Confession That Changed Everything. Morning light filtered through the conservatory windows, turning Robbie's skin to warm amber as she cradled her coffee cup like it held something more precious than caffeine. Mike watched her from across the table, memorizing the way she touched things, carefully, as if beauty might shatter under careless hands. She had slept in his guest room, eaten breakfast at his table, and somehow, in less than 24 hours, had become a presence that made the estate feel less like a mausoleum and more like a home. Margot moved between them, refilling cups and pretending not to notice the way Mike's attention never strayed far from their guest. When she finally disappeared into the kitchen with knowing eyes and a satisfied smile, Robbie set down her cup and looked at him directly. "I need to tell you something else," she said, her voice carrying the weight of confession, "about why Callahan has power over me, about why I'm really running." Mike leaned forward. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it." "You say that now." Robbie's laugh was bitter and broken. "Everyone says that before they know." "Try me." She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she wrapped them around her cup. "Callahan framed me for stealing money from my job. He manipulated records at the accounting firm where I worked, made it look like I'd been embezzling for months. When I found out, he told me he would make the charges disappear if I stayed, if I signed papers giving him full control over the twins, if I became the wife he wanted instead of the woman I was trying to be. Mike's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. And you refused. I refused, so he followed through on his threat. He had me arrested, prosecuted, convicted. I took a plea deal because his lawyers convinced me that fighting would mean years in prison, that the twins would grow up without me, that cooperation was the only way to minimize damage. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I served time, Mike. I have a criminal record. I'm a convicted felon, and that's what he's using against me now. That's why his lawyers say I'm unfit, because on paper I'm exactly what he says I am. Silence filled the conservatory, broken only by rain against glass and the sound of Robbie trying not to sob. Mike stood slowly and moved around the table, pulling out the chair beside her and sitting close enough that their knees touched. "Look at me," he said gently. She shook her head, her gaze fixed on her lap. I can't see your face when you realize what kind of person you let into your house. Robbie, look at me." Finally, she lifted her eyes to his, and Mike saw shame and fear and something that looked like resignation. He reached out and cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs wiping away tears. "I don't care about your record. I don't care what Callahan made you plead guilty to. I care about who you are right now, in this moment, and the fact that you love your sons enough to run toward the unknown rather than let him win." Mike's voice was fierce. "We're going to prove he framed you. We're going to clear your name, and we're going to make sure he never threatens you or your boys again. You can't promise that. Watch me." Something shifted in Robbie's expression, hope breaking through like sunlight through storm clouds. She leaned forward until her forehead rested against his, and Mike closed his eyes. Breathing in her scent, coffee and the lavender soap Margot had left in the guest bathroom, and underneath it all, something warm and alive and entirely Robbie. "I don't understand you," she whispered. "I don't understand how you can be real. I'm real, and I'm not going anywhere." The moment stretched between them, intimate and charged, and Mike felt something he had not felt in 15 years, the pull of attraction, the warmth of desire, the terrifying possibility of wanting someone again. He pulled back before he could do something foolish like kiss her, but his hands lingered on her face, an extra heartbeat, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with a tenderness that surprised them both. The sound of the front door opening broke the spell. Footsteps in the hall preceded Sterling Whitmore's arrival. Mike's business partner, appearing in the conservatory doorway with his usual impeccable timing and less than subtle curiosity. "Mike, we need to—" Sterling stopped mid-sentence, his eyes moving from Mike to Robbie and back again, reading the scene with the perceptiveness that made him excellent at negotiations. "I'm interrupting. Sterling, this is Robbie Shine. She'll be staying with us for a while." Mike stood, but kept one hand on Robbie's shoulder, a gesture of protection and something more. "Robbie, this is Sterling Whitmore. He's going to help us destroy your ex-husband." Sterling's eyebrows rose, but he recovered quickly, moving forward to shake Robbie's hand with the charm he usually reserved for difficult clients. "Pleasure to meet you, Robbie, and yes, destroying terrible ex-husbands is something of a specialty of mine." Despite everything, Robbie smiled. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Mike, can I speak with you privately?" Mike wanted to refuse, wanted to stay close to Robbie in case she needed him, but Sterling's expression said this conversation could not wait. He squeezed Robbie's shoulder gently. "I'll be right back. Margot will keep you company." In Mike's study with the door closed, Sterling wasted no time. "Please tell me you know what you're doing. I'm helping someone who needs help. You're falling for someone you met yesterday." Sterling's voice was gentle but firm. "Mike, I love you like a brother, but this is dangerous territory. You don't know anything about this woman, except what she's told you. You don't know if her story is true. You don't know if she's—" "Don't!" Mike's voice was steel. Don't finish that sentence. I have to, because you're not thinking clearly. You look at her and see something that reminds you of Catherine, and that's clouding your judgment. This has nothing to do with Catherine, doesn't it? The eyes, Mike. I noticed too. The resemblance is superficial. Mike moved to the window, staring out at rain that mirrored his turbulent thoughts. Yes, her eyes are the same color. Yes, there's something about her that makes me think of Catherine. But Sterling, when I'm with Robbie, I'm not thinking about the past. I'm thinking about right now, about how good it feels to care about something again, to want to fight for something, to feel alive. Sterling was quiet for a long moment. You're sure about this? I'm not sure about anything except that she needs help and I can give it. The rest, Mike turned to face his friend, the rest we'll figure out as we go. All right. Then let's get her sons back. Sterling pulled out his phone. I know a family lawyer who eats men like Callahan for breakfast. Simone Blackwell. She's expensive, vicious, and exactly what we need. Call her now. I want Robbie's boys here by the end of the week. Mike, custody battles take months. Then we'll make this one take days. Mike's expression left no room for argument. Whatever resources it requires, Sterling, whatever favors we need to call in, I want those children safe with their mother. Sterling studied him for another moment, then nodded and started dialing. As he spoke with the lawyer, explaining the situation in clinical terms that stripped away all emotion, Mike found himself thinking about Robbie sitting in the conservatory, probably convinced he was having second thoughts, probably packing mentally to leave before he could ask her to go. He returned to find her exactly where he left her, staring at her empty coffee cup like it held answers to questions she was afraid to ask. When she looked up and saw his face, relief flooded her features. You came back, she said softly. I told you I would. Mike sat beside her again, close enough that their shoulders touched. Sterling is calling a lawyer right now. By this afternoon, we'll have a plan to get Austin and Matthew here safely. Just like that? Just like that! Robbie shook her head in disbelief. I've been fighting Callahan for so long by myself. I forgot what it feels like to have someone on my side. Get used to it, Mike said. Because I'm not going anywhere, Robbie. Not until this is over. Not until you and your sons are safe. Not until... He stopped, uncertain how to finish that sentence, uncertain where the boundaries of his commitment truly ended. Not until what? She prompted, her amber eyes searching his face. Not until you tell me to leave, Mike finished quietly. And maybe not even then. The air between them grew thick with unspoken possibilities. Robbie reached for his hand, her fingers threading through his, with an ease that felt like they had been doing this for years instead of hours. Her touch sent warmth up his arm and straight to his chest, settling somewhere near his heart that had been cold for so long he had forgotten what warmth felt like. I need to see them, Robbie said suddenly. My boys, I need to know they're okay. Can we... Is there a way to... We'll go get them, Mike interrupted. Tomorrow. We'll drive to Tennessee, pick up Austin and Matthew, and bring them home. Home, Robbie repeated, testing the word. I haven't had one of those in a long time. You do now. She looked around the conservatory, at the expensive furniture and the view of manicured gardens and the casual wealth that surrounded them like air. I don't belong here, Mike. I don't know how to be in a place like this. I don't know how to... You belong anywhere you want to belong, Mike interrupted. And right now you belong here with me until we figure out the next step. And what is the next step? Mike looked at their joined hands, at the way her smaller fingers fit perfectly between his, and answered with an honesty that scared him. I have no idea, but I'm looking forward to finding out. Robbie laughed, the sound surprised and genuine and so beautiful that Mike wanted to find ways to make her laugh like that every day for the rest of his life. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like the first right thing he had thought in 15 years. Margot appeared in the doorway with lunch on a tray, pretending she had not been listening from the kitchen. You two need to eat. Can't rescue children on empty stomachs. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that comes when words feel less important than simply being present with another person. Mike watched Robbie savor each bite like it was a gift, watched her slowly relax into the chair, watched the tension leave her shoulders as she began to believe that maybe, possibly she was actually safe. After lunch, Mike showed her the rest of the estate, the library where Catherine had loved to read, the music room that had been silent for years, the gardens that bloomed even in autumn rain. Robbie touched everything with reverent fingers, and Mike found himself seeing his home through her eyes, appreciating beauty he had stopped noticing long ago. "Tell me about her," Robbie said as they stood in the portrait gallery, looking at a painting of a young woman with dark hair and a smile that promised sunshine. "Catherine!" Mike had not spoken Catherine's name aloud in months. It felt strange on his tongue, like a language he had once been fluent in but had nearly forgotten. "She was everything good that I was not, patient when I was impatient, kind when I was harsh. She saw the best in people even when they showed her their worst. She was beautiful. She was." But that was the least interesting thing about her. Mike moved closer to the portrait, remembering. She wanted children, wanted to fill this house with noise and chaos and love. "We were going to start trying after," his voice caught, "after her treatment was finished. But the treatment never finished because the cancer was faster than the medicine." Robbie's hand found his. "I'm sorry. I made her a promise when she died, that I would never love anyone else, that I would honor her memory by staying faithful to what we had." Mike turned to face Robbie. "It was a stupid promise, the kind you make when you're young, and grief makes you dramatic. But I've been keeping it anyway, and it's been killing me slowly for 15 years. "Is that what I am?" Robbie asked, her voice small. "A way to break your promise?" "No," Mike cupped her face, making her look at him. "You're not a way to do anything except remember what it feels like to be human. You're not about Catherine. You're about right now, about this moment, about the fact that when I look at you, I don't see the past. I see possibility." Tears slipped down Robbie's cheeks. "I'm so broken, Mike. I don't know how to be what you need. I don't need you to be anything except yourself, broken and all." He wiped away her tears with his thumbs. "We're both damaged, Robbie. Maybe that's why this works. Maybe we needed to be broken in exactly the right ways to fit together." She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "When I collapsed at your gates, I was ready to give up. I thought I had reached the end of everything. And then you opened the door and let me in, and suddenly I had a reason to fight again. Then we'll fight together," Mike said. The afternoon dissolved into evening, rain continuing its steady percussion against windows, while Mike and Robbie talked about everything and nothing. She told him about Austin's gentle nature, how he loved books and quiet and collecting rocks he found beautiful. She described Matthew's fierce spirit, how he protected his brother with toddler intensity and asked questions that had no easy answers. Mike shared stories about building his company from nothing, about the loneliness of success, about how he had been sleepwalking through his own life until she appeared and shocked him awake. When Margot announced dinner, they ate in the formal dining room that Mike had not used in years, the space feeling less cavernous with Robbie sitting across from him. She wore one of Margot's dresses, simple blue cotton that made her skin glow, and Mike found himself unable to look away, unable to stop imagining futures he had no right to imagine yet. "What are you thinking?" Robbie asked, catching him staring. "That I want to know everything about you. That one day isn't enough. That I want months and years of conversations like this." She set down her fork, her expression serious. "Mike, when we get the twins back, when this is over, what happens then? What do you want to happen?" "I don't know. I just know that I don't want this to end, whatever this is." Mike stood and moved around the table, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. She came willingly, her body fitting against his, like they had been designed for exactly this. Her head tucked perfectly under his chin, her hands resting on his chest over his heart that was beating faster than it had in 15 years. "It doesn't have to end," he said against her hair. "It can be whatever we want it to be." Robbie pulled back just enough to look up at him. "I'm scared." "Me too. What if Callahan wins? What if I lose the twins? What if? Mike silenced her with a finger against her lips. No what ifs. Not tonight. Tonight, we're just two people who found each other in a storm. Everything else can wait until morning. She nodded and then surprised him by rising on her toes to press a kiss to his cheek. It was chaste and brief, but Mike felt it burn like a brand, marking him as fundamentally changed from the man he had been yesterday. That night, Mike lay awake in his bed listening to the rain and thinking about Robbie sleeping down the hall. He thought about Catherine, about the promise he made, and the years he wasted honoring it. He thought about amber eyes and broken spirits, and the way Robbie's laugh made something loosen in his chest that had been tight for too long. Sometime after midnight, he heard soft footsteps in the hall. His door opened slowly, and Robbie stood silhouetted in the doorway wearing one of his shirts that Margot had given her to sleep in. "I couldn't sleep," she whispered. "I kept thinking about tomorrow, about seeing my boys, about what happens if Callahan fights back. Her voice broke. "I'm scared, Mike, I'm so scared." He pulled back the covers without hesitation. "Come here." She crossed the room and climbed into bed beside him, and Mike wrapped his arms around her, holding her close while she trembled against him. It was innocent and necessary, and somehow more intimate than anything physical could have been. Her hair smelled like lavender, her body warm and solid in his arms, proof that she was real and here and trusting him with her fear. "We're going to get your sons back," Mike said into the darkness. "I promise you, Robbie, whatever it takes." "Don't make promises you can't keep," she whispered. "I never do." They fell asleep like that. Tangled together in the bed Mike had kept empty for 15 years, and when morning came, neither of them regretted crossing that line from guest and host to something infinitely more complicated and exactly what they both needed. Chapter 3. The Twins Who Conquered His Heart. Dawn arrived reluctantly, grey light filtering through curtains that had remained closed through too many lonely mornings. Mike woke with Robbie still in his arms, her head on his chest, one hand curled against his shoulder like she was holding on to something precious. He lay still, not wanting to wake her, memorizing the weight of her against him, the soft sound of her breathing, the way her body fit perfectly against his side. When her eyes finally opened, there was a moment of disorientation before memory caught up with consciousness. She looked up at him, and Mike saw vulnerability and fear and something that might have been hope swimming in those amber eyes. "Morning." "Ah," she whispered. "Morning." Mike's hand moved to her hair, fingers threading through curls that were softer than they looked. "Did you sleep?" "Oh, better than I have in months." She sat up slowly, pulling his shirt down where it had ridden up during sleep. "Thank you for letting me stay. You can stay every night if you want." The offer hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to name. Robbie looked away, color rising in her cheeks. "We should get ready. It's a long drive to Tennessee." They prepared for the trip in a flurry of activity, Margot packing food and Sterling arriving with legal documents and contact information for Simone Blackwell. Mike drove his personal vehicle instead of having his driver take them, wanting privacy for whatever emotions the day would bring. Robbie sat in the passenger seat, gripping her bag like a lifeline, her leg bouncing with nervous energy. "Tell me about them again," Mike said as they merged onto the highway. "I want to know everything before we get there." Robbie smiled, and it transformed her face into something luminous. Austin came first. The nurses said it was unusual for the older twin to be so calm, but he just looked at me with these serious eyes, like he was studying me, deciding if I was worthy of being his mother. He was born holding Matthew's hand through the membrane, like he knew his brother would need protecting. "And Matthew?" "Matthew came out screaming and hasn't really stopped since." Her laugh was pure affection. "He's fire where Austin is water. He questions everything, challenges everyone, refuses to accept that something is impossible just because someone says so. He's going to change the world someday if he doesn't burn it down first." They sound remarkable. They are. They're everything good about me and nothing bad about Callahan, though I'm sure he would disagree. Her expression darkened. "He wanted sons." He just wanted them to be quiet, obedient, miniature versions of himself. When Matthew started showing personality, started asking why and refusing to just accept, Callahan called him defiant, called him damaged, said there was something wrong with him that needed to be fixed. Mike's hands tightened on the steering wheel. There's nothing wrong with questioning authority. That's what I told him. That's what started the worst fights. Robbie stared out the window at passing landscape. Callahan wanted to put Matthew on medication, said his energy was abnormal, that his curiosity was disruptive. I refused. So Callahan started threatening to have him diagnosed without my permission, to use medical records as proof I was denying our son necessary treatment. And Austin? Austin he loved, because Austin learned quickly to be whatever Callahan wanted him to be. Quiet, studious, perfectly behaved. But I could see it destroying him, watching him fold himself smaller and smaller to avoid making his father angry. Tears slipped down her cheeks. That's when I knew I had to leave. When I realized staying was teaching my boys that love means erasing yourself to please someone else. Mike reached across the console and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. You saved them. Remember that. Whatever happens today, whatever Callahan says, you saved your sons by leaving. The drive took hours, landscape shifting from Virginia hills to Tennessee valleys. They talked about everything and nothing, comfortable silence filling the spaces between conversations. Mike found himself telling her about his childhood, about parents who loved him but did not understand him, about building something from nothing because he needed to prove he was worth more than the legacy he was born into. Robbie shared pieces of her past, a difficult childhood, a mother who worked 3 jobs, a father who left before she was born, a determination to give her son stability she never had. That's why Callahan was so appealing at first, she admitted. He was stable, successful. He had a plan for everything, and I thought that meant he would be a good father. I thought structure and stability were the same thing. I didn't realize structure could become a cage. They reached Isla's apartment complex as afternoon shadows lengthened. It was a modest building in a neighborhood that was trying hard to be respectable despite obvious poverty. Robbie's hands shook as Mike parked, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. What if they don't remember me? She whispered. What if they hate me for leaving? They could never hate you. Mike unbuckled his seatbelt and turned to face her fully. You're their mother. You're the one who protected them. They know that, Robbie. Even if they're angry, they know. She nodded but looked unconvinced. Mike got out and came around to open her door, offering his hand. She took it and held on tight as they climbed stairs to the 3rd floor, her grip getting tighter with each step. Isla answered the door before they knocked, like she had been watching from the window. She was taller than Robbie, her hair in locks that fell past her shoulders, her expression a mixture of relief and judgment. About time, Isla said, but she pulled Robbie into a fierce hug. The boys have been asking for you constantly. Matthew keeps telling everyone you're coming back with a prince to save them. Not a prince, Robbie said, pulling back and gesturing to Mike. But this is Mike Wilson. Make my sister Isla. Isla looked Mike up and down, with an assessment that was clearly finding him lacking in some fundamental way. You're the one who's going to fix this? I'm going to help, Mike said simply. Before Isla could respond, a small voice called from inside the apartment. Mama! Robbie's whole body went rigid. A boy appeared behind Isla, small for his age, but with eyes that were ancient and serious. He looked at Robbie like he was afraid she might disappear if he blinked. Like maybe she was a dream he was trying desperately not to wake from. Austin, Robbie breathed. And then she was moving, dropping to her knees as her son launched himself into her arms. She held him like she was trying to absorb him into her body, like she could protect him from everything if she just held tight enough. You came back, Austin said into her shoulder. I told Matthew you would come back. Where is Matthew? Robbie asked, pulling back to look at her son's face, her hands framing his cheeks. He's hiding in the closet. He's mad at you. Austin said it matter-of-factly, without judgment. But he's also glad you're here. He just doesn't want you to know yet." Mike watched Robbie stand and move into the apartment, following the pull of her angry child. He stayed in the doorway with Isla, giving them space for reunion, while also needing to see how this unfolded. The closet door was closed, but Mike could hear movement inside. Robbie sat down on the floor outside it, her back against the wall, her voice soft but carrying. "Matthew, I know you're angry. You have every right to be angry. I left you and that was wrong, even though I did it to protect you." She paused. "But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving again. Not without you. Not ever again." Silence from the closet. "I brought someone with me. Someone who's going to help make sure Daddy can't take you away from me. His name is Mike and he's—" She stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "He's important, and he wants to meet you." More silence. Then a small voice, rough with suppressed tears. "Does he have a castle?" Robbie laughed, the sound watery but genuine. "Sort of. He has a really big house with gardens and lots of rooms. Enough rooms that you and Austin could have your own bedrooms. And there's a library with more books than you could read in a year." "Austin would like that," Matthew said. "He likes books. What about you? What would you like?" The closet door opened a crack, and I appeared in the opening, studying Robbie with an intensity that was heartbreaking in someone so young. "I like you. I would like you to not leave again." "I won't, I promise." Robbie held out her hand. "Come meet Mike. He's a little scary looking, but he's actually really nice." The door opened fully and Matthew emerged. Smaller than Austin despite being twins, his eyes red from crying, his hair a mess of curls that matched his mother's. He looked past Robbie to where Mike stood in the doorway. And Mike saw the exact moment the boy decided to test him. "If you hurt my mama, I'll hurt you back," Matthew announced with the seriousness of someone who meant every word. "That's fair," Mike said, moving into the apartment and crouching down to Matthew's level. "If I hurt your mama, I would deserve it. But I'm not planning to hurt her. I'm planning to help her keep you and your brother safe." Matthew studied him with eyes that were too old for his face. "Why, you don't even know us." "Not yet, but I'd like to, if you'll let me." "Do you really have a castle?" "I have a big house. It's not quite a castle, but it's pretty close." Mike pulled out his phone and showed Matthew pictures of the estate. "That's the main building, and that's the gardens, and that's the library your mom told you about." Matthew looked at the pictures, then back at Mike, then at his mother. "When can we go?" "Right now, if you want," Robbie said, fresh tears streaming down her face. "We can pack your things and go today." The next hour was chaos as Austin and Matthew stuffed belongings into bags with the desperate efficiency of children who had learned to live ready to run. Mike helped Austin pack books, listening to the boy explain each one's importance, impressed by the sophistication of his choices. Matthew mostly ordered everyone around, directing the packing operation like a tiny general, his earlier anger transforming into manic energy. Isla pulled Robbie aside while Mike distracted the twins. "Are you sure about this? You don't know this man. You don't know what you're walking into." "I know he's helping when no one else would. I know he looks at me like I matter. I know he's offering my son safety and stability." Robbie glanced toward where Mike was helping Austin lift a heavy bag. "And I know that for the first time in years, I don't feel alone." "Just be careful," Isla said. "Men who seem too good to be true usually are. He's not too good to be true. He's just good. And I'm going to trust that until he proves otherwise." The drive back to Virginia was louder and messier and infinitely better than the drive there. Austin sat behind Mike, asking questions about everything they passed, his curiosity insatiable and charming. Matthew sat behind Robbie, testing boundaries with increasingly outrageous statements designed to get reactions. Robbie fielded each test with patient humor, and Mike found himself smiling at her interactions with her sons, seeing her transform from the broken woman who collapsed at his gates into the strong mother she had always been underneath. "Are you going to marry my mama?" Matthew asked suddenly, his voice carrying that childish directness that made adults uncomfortable. "Matthew!" Robbie turned in her seat, her face flushed. "That's not, we don't ask." "It's all right," Mike said, meeting Matthew's eyes in the rearview mirror. That's a fair question. The answer is I don't know. Your mama and I just met. But I like her very much. And I like you and your brother too. So maybe someday, if that's something we all want. I think Austin would want it, Matthew said. He told me he likes you. He doesn't like most people. Is that true, Austin? Mike asked. Austin nodded seriously. You listen when I talk. Most adults just pretend to listen. But you actually hear what I'm saying. Something in Mike's chest cracked open at those words, at the simple gift of being seen by a child who had learned too young that adults lie. I will always listen to you, Austin. Both of you. If you live in my house, you get to have opinions and feelings and thoughts that matter. Even if we're wrong, Matthew challenged. Even then, being wrong is how you learn to be right. They arrived at the estate after dark, the building lit up like something from a fairy tale. Austin and Matthew pressed their faces to the windows, eyes wide with wonder. Margot met them at the door with hot chocolate and cookies, somehow having prepared bedrooms for both boys in the hours they were gone. Mike carried bags, while Robbie gave her sons the tour, watching them explore with the kind of joy that children should always have, but too often don't. Austin gravitated toward the library immediately, running his fingers along spines with reverent care. Matthew wanted to see everything, asking questions faster than anyone could answer them. When it was finally time for bed, both boys insisted on the same room despite Margot preparing two. They climbed into one bed together, a habit born of necessity that had become comfort. Robbie sat on the edge reading them stories until their eyes grew heavy, and Mike watched from the doorway, his heart doing things he did not entirely understand. After the twins finally fell asleep, Robbie found Mike in the library, staring at shelves he had not really seen in years. She moved to stand beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Thank you, she said simply, for today. For all of this, you don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You gave me my sons back. You gave them a safe place to sleep. You gave them... Her voice broke. You gave them hope. And me too. Mike turned to face her, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. You're remarkable, you know that? The way you are with them. The way you love them so fiercely, despite everything trying to break you. I learned from the best, Robbie said. They taught me how to fight, how to get back up, how to believe in tomorrow even when today is terrible. They stood in the lamplight, the estate quiet around them, and Mike felt the last of his resistance crumbling. 15 years of grief and isolation, of promises made to the dead, of refusing to let himself want or need or love, all of it dissolving in the face of this woman and her sons who had walked into his life and made it feel worth living again. Robbie, he started, not knowing how to finish. She smiled, tired and beautiful, and exactly where she was supposed to be. I know, me too. And somehow that was enough. Chapter 4. The Choice That Revealed Everything. Morning sun turned the estate golden, light spilling through windows that had been dark too long. Mike woke to the sound of children's laughter, a sound he had never heard within these walls, and for a moment he thought he was dreaming. Then memory caught up, and he was out of bed, following the noise to the kitchen, where Austin and Matthew sat at the table with Margot, eating pancakes and talking with their mouths full. Good morning, Mike said, and both boys looked up with expressions that suggested they were still not entirely sure this was real. Margot makes pancakes shaped like animals, Austin announced, pointing to his plate. Mine is an elephant because they're smart and remember everything. And mine is a dragon, Matthew said, because dragons are fierce and protect treasures. Mike poured coffee and sat with them, content to listen as Margot coaxed stories and laughter from children who clearly needed both. Robbie appeared in the doorway wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back, her face free of makeup, and Mike thought she had never looked more beautiful. Did you sleep? He asked as she slid into the chair beside him. Better than I have in months. She accepted the coffee he poured, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The boys? We slept great, Matthew said. The bed is huge and soft and there's no monsters under it because Austin checked. There are never monsters, Austin said, with the patience of someone who had explained this many times. Just shadows that look scary until you understand what's making them. Mike caught Robbie's eye and saw his own thought reflected there. This child was special in ways that deserved nurturing, not suppressing. They ate breakfast together, the six of them crowding around a table that had been too large for one, and Mike discovered he liked the chaos, liked the noise, liked feeling part of something that resembled a family. After breakfast, Sterling arrived with Simone Blackwell in tow. The lawyer was exactly as Sterling described, sharp, elegant, and carrying herself with the confidence of someone who won far more often than she lost. She shook Mike's hand firmly before turning her attention to Robbie. "Tell me everything," Simone said, settling into Mike's study with a legal pad and a recording device. "Every detail, every conversation, every piece of documentation you have. I need to understand exactly what we're fighting." Robbie laid out her story again, this time with Simone interrupting with questions that cut straight to legal strategy. Mike sat beside Robbie, his hand finding hers when the memories became too painful, his presence a steady anchor when she started to shake. "The embezzlement charge is the key," Simone said after an hour. "If we can prove Callahan framed you, everything else collapses. His custody claim rests primarily on your criminal record. Remove that, and he's just an angry ex-husband with no legal leverage." "Can we prove it?" Mike asked. "Possibly. I have investigators who specialize in financial fraud. If Callahan manipulated records, he left a trail. We find the trail, we build the case, we file for exoneration." Simone looked at Robbie directly. "This will take time. Months, maybe longer. Can you wait?" "Do I have a choice?" "There's always a choice. We can fight the custody battle with your record as it stands and hope the judge sees through Callahan's manipulation. But that's risky. Or we can play defense while building the exoneration case and go on offense when we have irrefutable proof." "What do you recommend?" Robbie asked. "I recommend you trust me to do what I do best." Simone's smile was sharp. "I recommend you live your life, love your children, and let me destroy your ex-husband legally and thoroughly." "How much is this going to cost?" Robbie's voice was small, already knowing she could never afford someone like Simone. "That's been handled," Simone said, glancing at Mike. "Your benefactor has ensured that money is not an object in this case." "Mike," Robbie turned to him, overwhelmed. "Not now," he said gently. "We'll talk about it later. Right now, let's focus on winning." The meeting continued for another hour, Simone outlining strategy and timeline and expectations. When she finally left with promises to call once her investigators found something, Robbie collapsed into a chair, emotionally exhausted. "I need to pay you back," she said. "Eventually, somehow, I need to—" "You need to stop thinking about money and start thinking about your sons," Mike interrupted. "They're safe. You're safe. That's all that matters right now." "Why are you doing this?" Robbie asked again, the question that kept circling back. "Nobody does this. Nobody helps this much without expecting something in return." Mike moved to kneel in front of her chair, taking both her hands in his. "I'm doing this because when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for. When I look at Austin and Matthew, I see children who deserve stability and love, and a childhood that isn't dictated by their father's cruelty. And when I look at myself, in the mirror, I see someone who finally has a reason to use his resources for something that actually matters." Tears spilled down Robbie's cheeks. I'm falling in love with you. I know it's too soon and probably just gratitude and definitely complicated, but I need you to know. I need to be honest about what I'm feeling, even if it's not what you want to hear. Mike's breath caught. What if it is what I want to hear? Is it? Instead of answering with words, Mike leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle and questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Robbie leaned in instead, her hands coming up to frame his face, her mouth opening under his with a hunger that matched his own. They kissed like drowning people finding air, like wounded soldiers finding peace, like lonely souls finally finding each other. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Mike rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling too, he admitted. I've been falling since I found you at my gates. Maybe before that. Maybe I was always going to fall for you the moment we met, and everything else was just destiny catching up. Destiny is terrifying, Robbie whispered. So is this, but I'm willing to be terrified if you are. They stayed like that, kneeling on his study floor, holding each other while the world spun outside and children played upstairs and lawyers built cases that would determine their future. Eventually Margot called them for lunch, and they separated. Reluctantly, neither wanting to let go, but both knowing they had to return to the reality of children and responsibilities. The afternoon brought Sterling with documents for Robbie to sign, paperwork, making her Mike's assistant formally, providing salary and benefits and legal employment status. She signed with shaking hands, overwhelmed by the practicality of having income again, of being able to support her children even minimally. Thank you, she said to Sterling when Mike left them alone to check on the twins, for not judging me, for helping even though you think Mike is making a mistake. Sterling smiled wryly. I never said I thought it was a mistake. I said I thought it was dangerous. There's a difference. Is there? Mistakes hurt you temporarily. Dangerous things change you permanently. Sterling studied her with the perceptiveness that made him Mike's most trusted friend. You're going to change him, Robbie. You already have. Just be careful with him, all right? He's been through enough. So have I, Robbie said softly. I know. That's why I'm helping. Because maybe two broken people can build something whole together. That evening, Mike joined Robbie in putting the twins to bed, a routine that was quickly becoming sacred. Austin insisted on 3 stories, his attention rapt as Mike read with different voices for each character. Matthew asked endless questions about the house, about Mike's life, about whether dragons were real, and if not, why not? Do you miss our daddy? Matthew asked suddenly, his voice small in the darkened room. Robbie stilled, her hand pausing where it had been stroking Matthew's hair. Sometimes I miss the person I thought he was, the person he pretended to be at the beginning. But not who he really is, Austin asked with his characteristic perceptiveness. No, not who he really is. Good, Matthew said, because I like Mike better. Mike doesn't yell and he doesn't make you cry. I like Mike too, Austin agreed sleepily. He makes Mama smile. We haven't seen her smile in a long time. Mike met Robbie's eyes over the twins' heads, seeing his own emotions reflected there, wonder and fear, and the terrifying hope that maybe, possibly, they were building something real from the ruins of their separate disasters. After the boys finally slept, Mike and Robbie retreated to the library, the room that was quickly becoming their sanctuary. They sat on the leather sofa, her feet tucked under his legs, his arm around her shoulders, comfortable in a way that should have taken months to achieve, but somehow felt natural after days. Tell me about Catherine, Robbie said suddenly. Really tell me. Not the perfect memory version, but who she actually was. Mike took a breath, surprised by the request, but recognizing its importance. She was stubborn, refused to admit when she was wrong, even when evidence was overwhelming. She hated mornings and loved midnight, stayed up too late reading and drank too much coffee. She could be petty when hurt and vengeful when betrayed. She sounds human, Robbie said. She was. I turned her into a saint after she died, but she would have hated that. She wanted to be remembered as real, not perfect. Mike pulled Robbie closer. When she got sick, she refused treatment at first. Said she had lived enough for someone her age that she would rather have a few good months than years of suffering. I talked her into trying anyway, and she hated me for it sometimes. Hated me for making her fight when she was ready to let go. But you couldn't let her go, Robbie said softly. No, I was selfish. I wanted more time, even if the quality of that time was terrible. And when she finally died, I made her a promise that I've been using as an excuse not to live. Mike turned to look at Robbie directly. Meeting you broke that excuse. Made me realize that keeping promises to the dead is just another way of dying slowly. What would Catherine think of me? Robbie asked. If she could see us now. Mike smiled. She would like you. She would approve of how you fight for your sons, how you refuse to break even when everything tries to break you. She would tell me I'm an idiot if I let you get away. I'm not going anywhere, Robbie promised. They kissed again. Deeper this time, Robbie shifting to straddle his lap, her hands in his hair, his hands spanning her waist. It was passionate, but not desperate, heated, but not rushed, both of them knowing they had time even if they wanted more right now. Mike broke the kiss reluctantly. We should stop. Why? Because your sons are upstairs. Because you've been through trauma and need time to heal. Because I want to do this right, not fast. Robbie smiled against his lips. What if I don't want to do it right? What if I want to do it now? Robbie, I know what I'm asking for. I know it's soon. But Mike, I've been not living for years. Callahan took everything from me, including my own body, my own choices. This is me choosing you, choosing to feel something good instead of just surviving. Mike searched her face, looking for doubt or uncertainty, finding only desire and determination. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He kissed her again, differently this time, with intent and promise and the certainty that they were crossing a line from which there would be no return. They made it to his bedroom with clothes falling away like inhibitions, hands exploring and mouths tasting and whispered words of desire, mixing with whispered confessions of feeling. Mike laid Robbie down on his bed, the bed that had been empty for 15 years, and looked at her in lamplight, beautiful and scarred, and trusting him with vulnerabilities she had protected fiercely. He worshipped her with his hands and mouth, learning what made her gasp and arch and moan his name, determined to give her pleasure after years of obligation and control. When he finally entered her, they both went still, overwhelmed by the intimacy of connection, by the emotional weight of what they were doing. They moved together slowly, learning each other's rhythm. Mike watching Robbie's face transform with pleasure, seeing joy replace the shadows that had lived in her eyes too long. She came apart in his arms, with his name on her lips, and Mike followed moments later, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a world that had been tilting sideways for 15 years. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, Robbie's head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. I love you, she said into the darkness. I know it's too soon and probably foolish, but I do. I love you too, Mike replied. And it's not too soon. Not for us. They fell asleep like that. Two broken people finding wholeness in each other. And when morning came, they woke to Matthew standing beside the bed, with his arms crossed and his expression suspicious. Are you marrying my mama now? He demanded. Because that's what people do after sleepovers. Mike laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. I'm working on it, buddy. Give me some time. Don't take too long, Matthew said seriously. She might change her mind. Then I better hurry, Mike agreed, meeting Robbie's eyes over Matthew's head and seeing his own future reflected there, messy and complicated and exactly what he wanted. Chapter 5. The Truth That Changed the Game. 3 weeks transformed the estate from museum to home. Austin's books populated the library shelves. Matthew's laughter echoed through halls that had been silent too long, and Robbie's presence made every room feel lived in rather than merely occupied. Mike found himself leaving work early, rushing home to chaos that felt infinitely better than the quiet that had been his companion for 15 years. But paradise came with shadows. Simone's investigators were making progress, finding discrepancies in the financial records from Robbie's former employer, but the trail was complicated, and Callahan had been careful. Every piece of evidence they uncovered spawned 3 more questions, and time was the enemy they could not defeat fast enough. The call came on an ordinary afternoon, while Mike was teaching Austin chess, and Robbie was helping Matthew with homework. Simone's voice through the phone carried professional neutrality that Mike had learned, meant bad news dressed in lawyer speak. "We need to meet," she said. "Today, if possible. I have information about Callahan's case against Robbie, and some of it is going to be difficult to hear." They met in Mike's study after the twins were in bed, Simone spreading documents across his desk with the efficiency of someone delivering bad news regularly. Robbie sat beside Mike, her hand gripping his until his fingers went numb, but he didn't pull away. "Callahan's lawyers have filed an emergency custody motion," Simone began. "They're claiming that Robbie abandoned the twins with her sister for extended periods, that she's now living with a man she barely knows, and that the environment here is unstable for children." "That's ridiculous," Mike said. "Legally, it has merit. Robbie did leave the twins with Isla, even if she had good reasons. She is living with a man she's known less than a month. And while your home is beautiful and safe, Callahan's lawyers will argue that luxury doesn't equal stability." Simone looked at Robbie directly. "They're also bringing up your criminal record, and they've added something new. Something you didn't tell me about." Robbie went pale. "What?" "According to their filing, you were hospitalized for a mental health crisis 2 years ago. 48-hour hold for evaluation after what they're calling a suicide attempt." Simone's voice was gentle but firm. "Is this true?" A silence filled the study. Mike turned to look at Robbie, seeing shame and fear warring in her expression. "It wasn't a suicide attempt," Robbie said finally, her voice barely audible. "I took too many sleeping pills because I hadn't slept in days and lost track of how many I had taken. Callahan called an ambulance and told them I was trying to kill myself. The doctors kept me because protocol required it, not because I was actually suicidal. Can you prove that?" Simone asked. "No, it's my word against Callahan's, and he made sure the hospital records reflected his version of events." Simone made notes, her expression unreadable. "This complicates things a lot. The judge will order a psychological evaluation, and depending on those results, could rule that the twins need to stay in Callahan's custody until you complete treatment." "Treatment for what?" Robbie's voice rose. "I'm not mentally ill. I was exhausted and desperate and made a mistake with medication. That's all." "I believe you," Simone said, "but convincing a family court judge is a different battle. We need to get ahead of this. I want you to see a psychologist immediately, someone who can evaluate you and testify on your behalf." "I don't need a psychologist," Robbie said, standing abruptly. "I need Callahan to stop lying about me. I need people to believe the truth instead of his manipulation." "Robbie..." Mike reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "No, this is exactly what he does. He takes something real and twists it until I look crazy. He makes me doubt myself until I can't remember what actually happened. And now you're all looking at me like maybe I am unstable, like maybe he's right." "Nobody thinks that," Mike said firmly. "Don't they?" Robbie looked between Mike and Simone. "Be honest. When you heard about the hospitalization, what was your first thought? That maybe I'm too broken to be a good mother? That maybe Callahan has a point?" My first thought was that he's a manipulative bastard who hurt you so systematically that you ended up in a hospital," Mike said, standing to face her. "My second thought was that you survived anyway, that you got out, got your sons out, and rebuilt from nothing. That's not broken, Robbie, that's extraordinary. Tears streamed down her face. I'm scared, Mike. I'm scared the judge will look at my record and my history and decide I'm not fit. I'm scared I'm going to lose Austin and Matthew because Callahan is better at lying than I am at telling the truth. Mike pulled her into his arms, holding her while she shook. Over her head he met Simone's eyes. What do? We fight. We get Robbie evaluated by someone who will see the truth. We continue investigating the embezzlement frame-up. We build a case so strong that Callahan's lies become obvious. Simone gathered her papers. But I need complete honesty from both of you. No more surprises. If there's anything else Callahan could use against you, I need to know now. Robbie pulled away from Mike, wiping her eyes. There's nothing else. I've told you everything. Every mistake, every vulnerability, every piece of my past that he can weaponize. There's nothing left to reveal. Good. Then we start fighting back. Simone moved toward the door. I'll have my assistant schedule the psychological evaluation. Be honest with the doctor, Robbie. Tell them about Callahan, about the control, about why you ended up hospitalized. The truth is your best defense. After Simone left, Mike and Robbie stood in the study, not touching, the space between them heavy with unspoken fears. Finally, Robbie spoke. Do you believe me? About the pills? Yes. How can you be sure? You weren't there. You don't know what really happened. Mike crossed to her, taking her face in his hands. I know you. I know how you love your sons. I know you would never intentionally do something that would leave them alone with Callahan. That's how I'm sure. Mike, if the judge rules against me, then we appeal. And we fight. And we don't stop fighting until you get your boys back permanently. He kissed her forehead. You're not alone in this, Robbie. Not anymore. That night, they made love with a desperation that spoke of fears neither wanted to name. Mike worshipped Robbie's body with his hands and mouth, determined to remind her that she was wanted and beautiful and worthy, despite what Callahan's accusations tried to make her believe. She clung to him like he was her anchor in a storm that threatened to pull her under. And when they finally collapsed together, sweaty and satisfied, they held each other like letting go meant drowning. The psychological evaluation happened 2 days later. Robbie returned to the estate, exhausted and wrung out, collapsing into Mike's arms the moment she walked through the door. She asked me everything, Robbie said against his chest. About my childhood, my marriage, the hospitalization, how I'm coping now. I told her the truth about all of it, but I don't know if she believed me. I don't know if I sounded sane or just like someone who's good at pretending to be sane. What's the difference? Mike asked, genuinely curious. Robbie pulled back to look at him. I don't know anymore. Callahan made me question reality so often that I can't tell what's real and what's his version of reality that I've accidentally adopted. That's what abuse does. It makes you doubt your own perception. Mike guided her to the sofa. But you got out. You're building something new. That takes strength and sanity, not weakness or instability. They were interrupted by the twins bursting into the room. Austin carrying a book and Matthew carrying questions about homework that definitely could have waited. But Robbie's face lit up at seeing them, and Mike watched her transform from anxious woman to loving mother in seconds. She listened to Matthew's rapid-fire questions with patient attention, helped Austin with a vocabulary word he didn't understand, and somehow made both boys feel like the most important people in the world. After dinner, Sterling arrived with news that made everyone gather in the study again. His expression was grim but determined. My investigators found something, he said without preamble. Callahan did frame you, Robbie. We can prove it. But the way he did it implicates people at your old firm who were either complicit or negligent. They're not going to cooperate without pressure. What kind of pressure? Mike asked. Legal, financial, the kind that makes cooperation more appealing than protecting Callahan. Sterling handed over a folder. We found evidence that Callahan was embezzling from multiple client accounts, not just the firm's general fund. He set up a pattern that pointed to Robbie, but he got greedy and took more than he could hide. The firm probably knows or suspects, but they've been covering for him to avoid scandal. So we threatened to expose them, Mike said. Exactly. We offer them a deal. Cooperate with Robbie's exoneration case, and we keep their reputation intact. Refuse, and we go public with everything. Sterling looked at Robbie. This is it. This is how we clear your name and destroy Callahan's credibility. Robbie looked overwhelmed. When can we start? Simone is already drafting the offer. We should have responses within the week. Hope flickered in Robbie's eyes, fragile but present. Mike took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. We're going to win this, he said. Don't promise what you can't guarantee, Robbie replied. I never do. Chapter 6. The victory that brought new threats. The firm capitulated within days, terrified of public exposure and eager to distance themselves from Callahan's fraud. 2 employees agreed to testify that they witnessed Callahan manipulating records and pressuring Robbie to sign documents she didn't fully understand. With their cooperation, Simone filed for exoneration, and the legal machinery ground into motion with surprising speed. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks away, and those weeks passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. Mike watched Robbie oscillate between hope and terror, and he did his best to provide stability while dealing with his own fears about how this would resolve. The twins sensed the tension, but responded with characteristic individuality. Austin grew quieter, spending hours in the library reading about things far beyond his years. Matthew became louder, his energy manifesting in constant motion and endless questions. Mike found himself dividing time between both boys, giving each what they needed, while supporting Robbie through her mounting stress. The night before the hearing, Robbie couldn't sleep. Mike found her at midnight standing in the library, staring at shelves without seeing them. Talk to me, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. What if it doesn't work? What if the judge doesn't believe the employees? What if Callahan convinces them he's the victim? Her voice was small and scared. What if I lose them, Mike? You won't. You can't know that. I can't, but I can promise that if the worst happens, we'll appeal. We'll fight. We'll do whatever it takes. Mike turned her to face him. And in the meantime, you need to sleep. You need to be strong tomorrow. I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see the judge ruling against me. I see Austin and Matthew being taken away. I see Mike silenced her with a kiss, gentle and reassuring. Then don't close your eyes. Stay with me. Right here, right now, where you're safe and your sons are asleep upstairs and nothing bad is happening. They made love on the library floor, slow and tender, Mike taking his time to worship every inch of Robbie's body, to remind her that she was loved and desired and worthy. She clung to him with desperate need, and when they finally came together, it was with whispered promises that tomorrow would bring victory, that they would win, that this was not the end but the beginning. The courthouse was intimidating, all marble and authority, and the weight of other people's decisions. Robbie wore a simple dress that Margot had helped her choose, her hair pulled back, her makeup minimal. She looked beautiful and terrified, and Mike wanted to punch Callahan just for putting that fear in her eyes. Callahan arrived with his lawyers, a team of expensive suits carrying briefcases that probably cost more than Robbie had earned in months at her accounting job. He looked at Robbie with an expression that mixed possession and contempt, and Mike moved instinctively to stand between them. "Mr. Wilson," Callahan said, his voice smooth and practiced. "Taking care of my family, I see. How generous." "Your former family," Mike corrected. "And yes, I am. We'll see how long that lasts when you realize what you've actually taken in. Damaged goods tend to require more maintenance than they're worth." Mike's hands clenched into fists, but Simone appeared beside him with a warning hand on his arm. "Don't give him what he wants. He's baiting you so you look volatile." The hearing took hours. Testimony from the firm's employees painted a damning picture of Callahan's manipulation. Financial experts walked through evidence of embezzlement. A forensic accountant demonstrated how records had been altered to frame Robbie. Through it all, Callahan sat with an expression of wounded innocence, his lawyers objecting to everything and painting Robbie as someone who was shifting blame to avoid responsibility. When it was finally Robbie's turn to testify, Mike watched her walk to the witness stand with pride and fear tangled together. She told her story clearly and honestly, neither dramatizing nor minimizing, just stating facts in a voice that only shook slightly. Callahan's lawyer tried to destroy her on cross-examination, bringing up the hospitalization, the fact that she left her children, her relationship with Mike that had developed so quickly. But Robbie held steady, answering each question without defensiveness, explaining context without excuses. "Isn't it true that you moved in with Mr. Wilson within days of meeting him?" the lawyer asked. "Yes. And isn't it true that he's been funding your legal defense?" "Yes." "So you're financially dependent on him?" "Currently, yes. I plan to repay him when I'm able." "That's very convenient. Move in with a wealthy man, convince him you're a victim, and let him pay for everything while you enjoy the benefits of his estate." Robbie's eyes flashed. "I didn't move in with Mike for money. I moved in because he offered safety when I had nowhere else to go. Everything he's done for me and my sons has been offered freely, without expectation or obligation. And yes, I'm grateful. But gratitude isn't the same as manipulation, no matter how much you want to pretend it is." The courtroom fell silent. Even Callahan's lawyer seemed momentarily taken aback by Robbie's directness. The judge called a recess to review evidence, and Mike pulled Robbie into a side room while they waited. She collapsed against him, shaking. "Was I okay?" she asked. "Did I say the right things?" "You were perfect," Mike assured her. "Strong and honest, and everything I knew you were." They waited for an hour that felt like days. Finally, they were called back, and the judge delivered her ruling in a voice that carried the weight of Solomon. "Based on the evidence presented, I'm overturning the embezzlement conviction. The testimony and financial records demonstrate that Ms. Shine was framed by her ex-husband, and the original plea deal was made under duress and without adequate legal representation." The judge looked directly at Robbie. "Your record is cleared, Miss Shine, and regarding custody, I'm granting you primary custody of Austin and Matthew, with supervised visitation for Mr. Bright pending further evaluation of his fitness as a parent." Robbie's knees gave out, and Mike caught her, holding her upright while she sobbed against his chest. Around them, Simone was shaking hands with the firm's lawyers, Sterling was gathering papers, and Callahan was arguing with his legal team in furious whispers. They left the courthouse to find reporters waiting, cameras flashing, questions being shouted from every direction. Mike shielded Robbie with his body, getting her to the car, while Sterling ran interference. Once they were safely inside with doors locked, Robbie looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "We won," she said, like she couldn't quite believe it. "We won," Mike confirmed. "I get to keep them. Austin and Matthew. They're mine. They were always yours. Now everyone knows it." The drive home was silent, Robbie holding Mike's hand like a lifeline, both of them emotionally exhausted but victorious. When they arrived at the estate, Margot met them at the door with the twins, who had been anxiously waiting for news. "Mama!" Austin launched himself at Robbie, and she caught him, spinning him around despite her exhaustion. "We won, baby. You get to stay here with me forever." "I told you we would," Austin said, with the confidence of someone who had never doubted. "Mike promised, and he keeps his promises." Matthew hugged her legs, uncharacteristically quiet. "Daddy can't take us away anymore." "No, sweetheart, he can't. You're safe now." They celebrated with ice cream for dinner and movies until bedtime, the twins chattering excitedly about everything being different now, about not having to worry anymore. Mike watched Robbie with her sons, seeing the weight lift from her shoulders, seeing her smile reach her eyes for the first time since he met her. That night, after the boys were asleep, Mike and Robbie retreated to his bedroom. They made love slowly, savoring every touch and kiss, celebrating victory, and promising forever with their bodies when words felt inadequate. Afterwards, lying tangled together in sheets that smelled like sex and satisfaction, Robbie traced patterns on Mike's chest. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for believing me, for fighting for us, for giving my sons a home and stability and safety. You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. Because you saved us, Mike. You saved me when I had given up on being saved." "You saved yourself," Mike corrected. "I just provided resources. The strength was always yours." She kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. "I love you. I know we haven't talked about the future, but I need you to know. I love you completely." "I love you too," Mike cupped her face. "And I want to talk about the future. I want to talk about making this permanent. About you and the twins staying here not as guests but as family." "Are you asking me to marry you?" "Not yet, but soon," Mike smiled. "I want to do this right. Robbie, I want to court you properly and propose when the time is right and build something with you that lasts forever." "Forever sounds good," she whispered. They fell asleep wrapped around each other. Two people who had been broken, finding wholeness together, and for the first time in years. Both of them slept without nightmares, but peace was temporary. 2 weeks later, Mike's phone rang at midnight, Sterling's voice urgent and apologetic. "Turn on the news," Sterling said. "Channel 7, now." Mike fumbled for the remote, not wanting to wake Robbie, who was asleep beside him. The television flickered to life, showing a news anchor with a serious expression. "Breaking news tonight about billionaire Mike Wilson and his relationship with convicted criminal Robbie Shine. Sources close to the family say that Wilson has been funding Shine's legal defense in exchange for sexual favors, and that the custody victory earlier this month may have been influenced by Wilson's financial contributions to political campaigns." Mike's blood went cold. On screen, photos of him and Robbie appeared, leaving the courthouse at a restaurant in his car. All taken without their knowledge, all edited to look damning. The allegations claim that Shine targeted Wilson specifically, researching his past relationship with Catherine Mitchell, who died 15 years ago, and manipulating Wilson's grief to gain access to his wealth. Sources say that Shine's resemblance to Mitchell is no coincidence, but calculated strategy. Robbie stirred beside him, waking to see the television. Her face went white. "Mike, I would never—" "I know," he said immediately. "Callahan did this. He's trying to destroy your reputation since he couldn't win legally." The news continued. Talking heads debating whether Mike was a victim or a willing participant. Speculation about Robbie's motives. Questions about whether the twins were safe in an environment built on manipulation and deception. It was character assassination dressed as journalism, and Mike recognized Callahan's signature in every carefully worded insinuation. "What do we do?" Robbie asked, her voice small and terrified. Mike turned off the television and pulled her into his arms. "We fight. Again, because that's what we do." But even as he said it, Mike knew this battle would be harder than custody hearings and exoneration. This was a battle for public opinion, and in that arena, truth mattered far less than narrative. Chapter 7. The Scandal That Exposed Everything. Morning arrived with the kind of cruelty that makes you wish you could rewind time. Mike woke to hundreds of notifications on his phone, emails, texts, missed calls, all related to the news story that had broken overnight. His board of directors had called an emergency meeting. Sterling had been fielding press calls since dawn, and Robbie was sitting on the edge of the bed, with her head in her hands, crying silently. "We need to get ahead of this," Mike said, scrolling through messages with mounting frustration. "We need to control the narrative before it controls us." "How?" Robbie's voice was broken. "They're saying I manipulated you, that I researched Catherine and made myself look like her to trap you. Mike, they're making me sound like a monster." "You're not a monster. You're someone Callahan is trying to destroy because he lost." Mike set down his phone and moved to sit beside her. "We tell the truth. We explain how we met, how our relationship developed naturally, how Callahan is behind these lies. Will anyone believe us?" Before Mike could answer, Margot knocked on the door. "The twins are awake. They're asking questions about the television," Someone at school sent Austin a link to the news story. Robbie's face crumpled completely. My babies, they're going to see all those lies about me. Mike stood, pulling her up with him. Then we talk to them first. We tell them the truth before anyone else can tell them lies. They found Austin and Matthew in the kitchen, both boys unusually quiet, staring at a tablet that showed the news story. Austin looked up when they entered, his expression serious and sad. Mama, the internet says you're bad. It says you tricked Mike and that you don't really love us. Austin's voice wobbled. That's not true, is it? Robbie dropped to her knees in front of her sons, taking both their hands. Listen to me. Everything you read is lies that your father told to hurt us. I love you more than anything in this world. And I love Mike because he's kind and good, and he helped us when nobody else would. Nothing about our family is fake or manipulative. Do you understand? But why would Daddy lie? Matthew asked, his usual fire replaced by confusion. Because sometimes people do bad things when they're angry or hurting. Your father is angry that he can't control us anymore, so he's trying to hurt us in other ways. Robbie pulled them into a hug. But we're going to be okay. We're going to tell the truth, and people will believe us eventually. What if they don't? Austin asked, always the perceptive one. Then we'll still have each other, Mike said, crouching down to join them. And that's what matters. Not what strangers think, but what we know is true. The boys seemed to accept this, though uncertainty lingered in their eyes. After breakfast, Mike had to attend the emergency board meeting, leaving Robbie with the twins and Margot. Sterling picked him up, briefing him during the drive about what to expect. They're scared, Sterling said. The board sees this as a liability that could affect stock prices and investor confidence. They're going to push for you to distance yourself from Robbie until this blows over. That's not happening. I know, but you need to handle them carefully. Show them you're in control, that this won't affect operations, that their concerns about company reputation are being addressed. The board meeting was exactly as brutal as Sterling predicted. Directors Mike had worked with for years looked at him with mixture of concern and judgment, clearly believing at least some of what the news reported. We need to discuss your personal life, the chairman said without preamble. Specifically, how it's affecting Wilson Global's reputation. My personal life is not relevant to company operations, Mike replied calmly. It is when it becomes public scandal. The chairman slid a folder across the table. We've already seen impact. 3 major clients have called requesting meetings to discuss whether they want to continue contracts. Investors are nervous. The media is portraying you as someone who was manipulated by a woman with a criminal record. A record that was overturned because she was framed. The public doesn't care about nuance. They care about scandal. And right now, you are scandal. The chairman leaned forward. We're recommending you take a leave of absence. Let someone else run operations while you sort out this mess. And we're strongly suggesting you distance yourself from Ms. Shine until the media attention dies down. Mike stood abruptly. Let me be clear. I will not take a leave of absence. I will not distance myself from Robbie. And anyone who has a problem with my personal choices is welcome to sell their shares and find another company to invest in. Mike, Sterling tried to intervene. No, I built this company from nothing. I made every person in this room wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. And I'm not going to apologize for finding someone who makes me happy after 15 years of being alone. Mike looked around the table. Robbie and her sons are my family now. If that makes you uncomfortable, that's your problem, not mine. He walked out before anyone could respond, Sterling following with an expression that mixed admiration and concern. That went well, Sterling said sarcastically. I don't care. I'm not playing their games. They could force you out. Mike, they have the votes if they decide you're more liability than asset. Then let them try. Mike got into the car, exhausted and angry and certain of only one thing. He would not sacrifice Robbie to protect a board of directors who cared more about money than loyalty. When he returned to the estate, he found Robbie in tears again, this time over an email from the twins' school. Parents were complaining about Austin and Matthew attending, concerned that the scandal would reflect badly on the institution. The headmaster was requesting a meeting to discuss whether the boys should be withdrawn until things settled down. "They want to punish my children for lies," Callahan told, Robbie said, her voice vibrating with fury and desperation. "They want to take away the one stable thing Austin and Matthew have found because other parents are gossiping." Mike read the email, rage building with each condescending word. "We're not withdrawing them, and we're going to that meeting tomorrow to make clear that if anyone has a problem with your sons, they can answer to me." That night brought no rest. The media circus grew larger, more outlets picking up the story, more sources close to the family making up details that had no basis in reality. As social media exploded with opinions from strangers who knew nothing about their situation but felt entitled to judge anyway. Mike held Robbie while she cried herself to sleep, feeling helpless in the face of destruction that could not be fought with money or lawyers or threats. This was the court of public opinion, and in that arena, truth was irrelevant compared to narrative. The meeting with the headmaster was uncomfortable and infuriating. The man sat behind his desk with the expression of someone who believed he held all the power, explaining that the school had a reputation to protect and that perhaps Austin and Matthew would be better served at a different institution until the media attention subsided. "Are you asking my sons to leave?" Robbie asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "We're suggesting that a temporary withdrawal might be in everyone's best interest, including my children, who would lose friends and stability because their father is a liar and other parents are judgmental." Robbie leaned forward. "Let me be clear. My sons are not leaving this school. They have done nothing wrong. If other parents have a problem, they're welcome to withdraw their children instead. Miss Shine, I understand you're upset, but nothing." Mike stood, done with diplomacy. "My sons are staying, and if you attempt to force them out, I'll make sure every news outlet that's covering this scandal knows that your institution discriminates against children based on their parents' circumstances. I'm sure that will do wonders for your precious reputation." They left the office with the headmaster sputtering behind them, neither satisfied with the outcome, but both determined to fight for normalcy in the twins' lives. But normalcy was impossible. Photographers started camping outside the estate gates. Reporters called constantly. Every time they left the house, cameras followed. The twins couldn't play in the garden without telephoto lenses capturing every moment. The pressure built until something had to break, and when it did, it was Robbie. Mike found her packing 3 weeks after the scandal broke, shoving clothes into bags with shaking hands and tear-stained cheeks. "What are you doing?" Mike asked, though the answer was obvious and terrifying. "Leaving. I'm destroying your life, Mike. Your company, your reputation, your peace. The twins can't even play outside without being photographed. This is all my fault. This is Callahan's fault. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. What matters is that staying is hurting you and the boys. So I'm leaving, taking them somewhere quiet where we can disappear until people forget about us." Mike moved to block the door. "You're not leaving. You can't stop me. Watch me." Mike took the bag from her hands and set it aside. "Robbie, I love you. I don't care about the media or the board or what strangers think. I care about you and Austin and Matthew, and I'm not letting you run because Callahan is trying to scare you away. I'm not running. I'm protecting you. By leaving, by taking my family away?" Mike cupped her face, making her look at him. "You're my family now, Robbie. You and the twins. And family doesn't abandon each other when things get hard. This isn't just hard. This is impossible. Nothing is impossible. We just need to be smarter than Callahan." Mike kissed her forehead. "Stay, please. Let me protect you instead of pushing me away to protect me." Robbie collapsed against him, sobbing. "I don't know how to keep fighting. I'm so tired, Mike. I'm so tired of everything being a battle. Then let me fight for you. Let me carry some of the weight." Mike held her close, feeling her tremble in his arms. "We're going to win this, Robbie, but only if we stay together." She nodded against his chest, too exhausted to argue anymore. They stood in the bedroom holding each other while outside the gates. Cameras continued clicking and reporters continued speculating, and the world continued trying to tear apart what they had built. That night, Mike made a decision. If Callahan wanted war, he would get war. But this time, Mike would fight with weapons Callahan never anticipated. Chapter 8. The Turning Point. Mike called Simone and Sterling to his study the next morning, his expression grim but determined. Robbie sat beside him, exhausted but present, refusing to hide anymore, despite everything in her wanting to disappear. "We're done playing defense," Mike announced. "It's time to go after Callahan directly. Destroy him so completely he can never threaten us again." "What did you have in mind?" Sterling asked, intrigued. "Everything. Every illegal thing he's done, every person he's hurt, every secret he's kept. I want it all exposed. I want him to feel exactly what he's been making Robbie feel." Simone made notes. "That's a significant undertaking, and potentially legally dangerous if we cross certain lines." "Then we stay on the right side of legal while making his life hell," Mike said. "Can you do that?" "I can try." Simone looked at Robbie. "But I need you to tell me everything about Callahan that we haven't discussed. Every vulnerability, every mistake, every person who might have reason to testify against him." Robbie took a breath and began talking. She described how Callahan had affairs throughout their marriage, some with colleagues, some with clients, all conducted with arrogance that suggested he never expected consequences. She talked about his drinking, how it escalated over the years until he was consuming entire bottles of whiskey nightly, but somehow maintaining the appearance of sobriety in public. She revealed that he had bragged about manipulating business deals, about lying to investors, about using company resources for personal benefit. "There's also his temper," Robbie added quietly. "He never hit me, but he would destroy things when angry. Punch walls, throw furniture, break dishes. One time, he drove his car into a tree deliberately because we had an argument, and he wanted to scare me. He told the insurance company it was an accident." Sterling wrote everything down. "This is good. This is very good. We can work with all of this." Over the following weeks, Simone's investigators dug into every corner of Callahan's life. They found financial irregularities beyond the embezzlement that framed Robbie. They located women willing to testify about affairs and inappropriate workplace behavior. They discovered a pattern of insurance fraud and tax evasion that went back years. Meanwhile, Mike worked on the public relations problem. He hired a crisis management firm specializing in reputation repair, and together they crafted a counter-narrative. Mike gave an exclusive interview to a respected journalist, telling their love story from his perspective, emphasizing how Robbie saved him from 15 years of isolation, rather than manipulated him in his grief. "Catherine would have loved Robbie," Mike told the interviewer, "not because they looked similar, but because they both refused to let life defeat them. Robbie survived abuse and framing and losing her children temporarily, and she came out stronger. That's not manipulation. That's extraordinary resilience." The interview aired and changed the conversation slightly. Public opinion began to shift as people saw Mike and Robbie as real humans rather than tabloid caricatures. Photos of the twins playing in the garden, clearly happy and well-adjusted, softened hearts. Stories from people who knew Robbie personally contradicted the narrative Callahan had constructed. But the real breakthrough came when one of Callahan's former employees contacted Simone directly. The woman, whose name was Bryn, had information about Callahan's business practices that went beyond embezzlement into criminal territory. "He was running a Ponzi scheme," Bryn explained during their meeting. "Small scale, but definitely illegal. He would take money from new clients to pay returns to old clients. always moving funds around to hide the fact that the accounts weren't actually earning what he claimed. I kept quiet because he threatened to destroy my career if I talked. But I'm done being scared of him. With Bryn's testimony and documentation, Simone filed reports with financial regulatory agencies and law enforcement. Within days, Callahan was under investigation for securities fraud, a crime that carried significant prison time if proven. The media attention shifted from Mike and Robbie to Callahan's legal troubles. Reporters who had been camped at the estate gates suddenly decamped to follow the more salacious story of a financial advisor facing criminal charges. Mike watched Callahan's world collapse with satisfaction, but not quite joy. He took no pleasure in destruction for its own sake, but he felt fierce protectiveness toward his family and relief that the threat was finally being neutralized. The twins adjusted to the reduced media attention with remarkable resilience. Austin returned to his books, Matthew to his endless questions, both boys slowly relaxing as normalcy became possible again. The school backed down from suggestions that they withdraw, especially once several parents came forward supporting the family. Mike's board of directors remained tense but less hostile, especially when stock prices rebounded and clients who had threatened to leave ultimately stayed. Sterling handled most of the political maneuvering, leaving Mike free to focus on rebuilding the life Callahan had tried to destroy. Through everything, Mike and Robbie's relationship deepened. They learned each other's wounds and triggers and fears. They discovered how to fight without destroying, how to disagree without disconnecting, how to love without losing themselves. One evening, after the twins were in bed, Mike found Robbie standing on the back terrace overlooking the gardens. Moonlight turned her skin silver, and she looked like something ethereal and precious as she stood there, wrapped in one of his sweaters. "What are you thinking?" Mike asked, coming to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "That I'm happy. Actually happy, not just not sad." She leaned back against him. "I didn't think I would ever feel this way again. Safe and loved and like the future might be something good instead of something to survive." "The future is going to be extraordinary," Mike promised. "How can you be sure?" "Because we're in it together." He turned her to face him. "Robbie, I want to ask you something, and I need you to know I'm serious. Not joking, not speaking metaphorically. Completely serious." "Okay," she said slowly, clearly nervous about what was coming. Mike pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a ring. Simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught moonlight and threw it back in prismatic colors. Robbie's breath caught. "I know we haven't been together long by conventional standards. I know we've been through trauma and scandal and enough drama for a lifetime. But I also know that I love you completely. I love Austin and Matthew like they're my own sons. And I want to make this permanent." Mike dropped to one knee. "Robbie Shine, will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and the twins' father legally and officially? Will you build a life with me that lasts forever?" Tears streamed down Robbie's face, but she was smiling. "Yes, yes, absolutely, yes." Mike slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that tasted like tears and promises and the future they were choosing together. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Robbie looked at the ring on her hand with wonder. "I can't believe this is real," she whispered. 6 months ago, I was living in fear. Now I'm standing in a garden with a man I love, wearing an engagement ring. How did this happen?" "Rain," Mike said simply. "You showed up in the rain, and everything changed." They made love that night with engagement ring glinting between them, celebrating promises made and promises yet to be fulfilled. Mike worshipped Robbie with renewed devotion, amazed that this extraordinary woman had agreed to be his wife, determined to spend the rest of his life proving he deserved her trust. Telling the twins the next morning brought reactions that perfectly matched their personalities. Austin said, "I knew that was going to happen," with the smug certainty of someone who understands cause and effect. Matthew screamed with excitement and immediately started planning the wedding with ideas that were creative, if impractical. "Can we have dragons?" Matthew asked seriously. "Real ones would be best, but I guess fake ones work too." "We'll see what we can arrange," Mike promised, ruffling the boy's hair. The wedding was planned for 3 months away, giving them time to do it properly without the rushed feeling of desperation. Mike wanted something intimate but beautiful, something that honored both Catherine's memory and the new family he was building. The day before the wedding, Mike visited Catherine's grave alone. He brought flowers and sat on the grass beside the headstone, talking to her the way he had talked to her portrait in his study so many times over 15 years. "I'm getting married tomorrow," he told her, "to someone you would have liked, to someone who makes me feel alive again. I wanted you to know, wanted to tell you myself, that I'm finally keeping the promise I should have made 15 years ago. The promise to live fully, to love completely, to build the life you wanted for me." The wind rustled through trees, and Mike chose to believe it was Catherine's blessing. He stayed another hour, talking about Robbie and the twins, about the life they were building, about how grateful he was for the 15 years with Catherine, while also being grateful they were over. "Thank you," he said finally, "for loving me, for leaving me, for making me promise things I couldn't keep, so I would eventually learn what promises actually matter. I hope wherever you are, you're proud of who I've become." He stood and walked away from the grave, and for the first time in 15 years, he didn't look back. Chapter 9. The Wedding That Healed Everything. The estate bloomed with flowers, transformation turning property into venue overnight. Mike had spared no expense, but the result was elegant rather than ostentatious. White roses climbing arbors, silk draping from trees, soft lighting that would make evening look magical. The guest list was small by billionaire standards. Sterling stood as best man. Simone attended with her wife. Margot supervised everything with the efficiency of someone who had been waiting years to see Mike happy. Vivienne arrived looking healthy and proud, her brief illness behind her, her acceptance of Robbie complete after months of getting to know her daughter-in-law. Austin and Matthew wore matching suits, both boys taking their roles as ring-bearers with adorable seriousness. They had practiced walking in step for weeks, determined to get it perfect for their mother's special day. Mike stood under the arbor, watching guests arrive, nervous in a way he had not anticipated. Sterling appeared beside him with a flask. "Liquid courage," Sterling offered. "I don't need courage. I'm marrying exactly who I want to marry." "Then why are your hands shaking?" Mike looked down, surprised to see Sterling was right. "I'm afraid something will go wrong. That Callahan will show up with some last-minute legal maneuver, that Robbie will realize she's making a mistake, that the universe will decide I don't get to be this happy." "The universe doesn't work that way," Sterling said, "and Callahan is too busy with his legal troubles to bother you. And Robbie looks at you like you hung the moon. Nothing is going to go wrong, Mike. Today is about joy, not fear." Music started, signaling the ceremony's beginning. Margot walked down the aisle first, unofficial grandmother to boys who desperately needed one. Then Austin and Matthew, walking in perfect synchronization, despite Matthew's tendency to bounce, both carrying rings on silk pillows with expressions of intense concentration. Then Robbie appeared, and Mike forgot how to breathe. She wore champagne, silk that complemented her skin perfectly, the dress simple and elegant and stunning. Her hair was loose in natural curls, threaded with small white flowers. She carried a bouquet of autumn blooms, and her smile when she saw Mike waiting was the most beautiful thing he had ever witnessed. Isla walked her down the aisle, the traditional father absent, but his replacement perfect. When they reached the arbor and Isla handed Robbie to Mike, she whispered something that made Robbie laugh, and Mike loved Isla for giving her sister that moment of levity before the seriousness of vows. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They had written their own vows, choosing words that spoke to their specific journey rather than generic promises. Mike went first, taking Robbie's hands and looking into her amber eyes that no longer reminded him of Catherine, but simply belonged to Robbie. 6 months ago, you collapsed at my gates in a storm, and I thought I was saving you. I didn't realize you were saving me. You brought life back to this house. You brought purpose back to my days. You showed me that love isn't about perfection or ease, but about choosing someone every day despite the difficulties. I promise to choose you every day for the rest of my life. I promise to love Austin and Matthew as my own sons, to protect our family, to build a future worthy of the second chance we've both been given. Robbie's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady when she spoke. I was running when I found you, running from fear, from pain, from a future that looked impossible, and you offered shelter when I had nowhere to go. You fought for me when I had forgotten how to fight for myself. You loved my sons when they desperately needed someone to show them what a good man looks like. I promised to love you completely, to trust you with my vulnerabilities, to build a life with you that honors both our pasts while creating something entirely new. I promise that every day you wake up beside me, you'll know you're loved and valued and exactly where you're supposed to be. The officiant pronounced them married, and Mike kissed his wife with enthusiasm that made the twins giggle and the guests applaud. When they finally broke apart, both were crying and smiling, and Mike felt 15 years of grief finally release its hold completely. The reception was perfect chaos. Dinner featured toasts that were alternately touching and hilarious. Simone told stories about legal victories that made everyone appreciate what they'd overcome. Sterling reminisced about Mike before Catherine, painting a picture of someone young and uncertain who had become the confident man standing before them. Margot spoke about watching the estate transform from mausoleum to home, about how Robbie had brought back laughter and light. Austin gave a speech that was surprisingly articulate for someone his age. Mike isn't my real dad, but he's my actual dad. The man who gave me DNA isn't the same as the man who reads me stories and answers my questions and makes sure I feel safe. Mike does all those things. So even though he's technically my stepdad, I just call him Dad, because that's what he is. Matthew's speech was shorter and more direct. I like having a family that's happy. Before, family meant being scared. Now family means having fun. That's because of Mike. So thank you for marrying my mum and making us Wilsons. There wasn't a dry eye in the venue after the twins spoke. Mike pulled both boys into hugs, overwhelmed by the gift of being accepted so completely by children who had every reason to be suspicious of new men entering their mother's life. The traditional first dance approached, and Mike led Robbie onto the floor while musicians played a song they had chosen together, something about second chances and new beginnings. They swayed together, lost in each other, the rest of the world fading away. Happy? Mike asked. Deliriously, Robbie replied. I keep waiting for someone to tell me this is a dream. It's real, and we're married. Say it again. We're married, Mrs. Wilson. Robbie laughed, the sound pure joy. I like that, Mrs. Wilson. It sounds like someone stable and happy and exactly who I want to be. They danced until other couples joined them, until the floor filled with people, celebrating love and family and the remarkable journey that had brought them all together. Mike danced with his mother, with Margot, with Isla, who warned him that if he ever hurt her sister, she knew people. He laughed and promised to treat Robbie like the treasure she was. As evening became night and the party continued, Mike pulled Robbie away to a quiet corner of the garden. They stood under string lights, watching their family and friends celebrate, both overwhelmed by how much had changed in such short time. I have something for you, Mike said, pulling out a folded paper from his jacket pocket. I wrote you a letter. I meant to give it to you earlier, but I got nervous. Robbie unfolded the paper and read by lamplight, and Mike watched her face transform as she absorbed his words. He had written about finding her, about falling in love, about watching her be a mother, and learning what strength really looked like. He had written about Catherine, about finally letting go, about being grateful for the past while being excited for the future. He had written about Austin and Matthew, about how they had conquered his heart completely, about how being their father felt like the role he was meant for all along. When Robbie finished reading, she was crying again, but smiling. "How are you this perfect?" "I'm not perfect. I'm just a man who got extraordinarily lucky when a woman collapsed at his gates in the middle of a storm." They kissed under the stars, while music played and guests danced and children laughed, and Mike thought about how 6 months could change everything, could take someone from broken to whole, from alone to surrounded by love. The party wound down eventually, guests leaving with hugs and well wishes. Austin and Matthew went home with Margot for the night, giving Mike and Robbie privacy for their wedding night. They returned to the estate as husband and wife, the title still feeling surreal and wonderful. Mike carried Robbie over the threshold, despite her protests that she was perfectly capable of walking, both of them laughing as he navigated stairs with his wife in his arms. In their bedroom, no longer his but theirs, they undressed each other, slowly, appreciating the moment, understanding that this was different than all the times before. They made love as spouses, the act carrying weight beyond physical pleasure. Mike worshipped his wife with hands and mouth, determined to show her how much she meant to him, how grateful he was for every moment they had together. Robbie met his passion with her own, confident and assured, no longer the broken woman who arrived in the rain, but someone who had reclaimed herself completely. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, both satisfied and content, talking about everything and nothing the way couples do when time feels infinite. "I want to have another baby," Robbie said suddenly. "With you, a child we create together." Mike's heart swelled. "I would love that. When?" "Soon. I want Austin and Matthew to have a sibling close enough in age that they can grow up together. I want our family to keep growing until this house is full of noise and chaos and love. And then that's what we'll do." Mike kissed her forehead. "As many children as you want, Robbie. As much family as we can build. As much happiness as we can possibly create." They fell asleep planning a future that felt limitless. Two people who had been broken finding wholeness together, and when morning came, they woke as Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, ready to start the rest of their lives. Chapter 10. The Resolution That Healed Everything. Spring arrived with renewal, gardens blooming in riots of color that seemed to celebrate everything good about new beginnings. Robbie stood in the conservatory looking at the pregnancy test with wonder and disbelief, even though they had been trying for this exact result. 2 pink lines confirming that their family would expand, that the child they created together was already growing. She found Mike in the library with Austin, both bent over a blueprint for a treehouse they were designing together. Matthew was outside with Margot planting vegetables in the garden. They had expanded specifically for his boundless energy. It was a Saturday morning, the kind of peaceful domestic scene that Robbie had stopped believing was possible for her. "Mike," she said softly, and he looked up immediately, reading something in her expression that made him stand. "Boys." "Give us a minute," Mike said, and Austin nodded with his characteristic perceptiveness, gathering papers and leaving without questions. Alone, Robbie handed Mike the test. She watched his face transform as understanding dawned, watched joy and wonder, and something like awe spread across his features. "We're having a baby," he said, voice thick with emotion. "We're having a baby," Robbie confirmed. Mike pulled her into his arms, holding her gently like she was something precious and fragile, which in this moment she supposed she was. They stood there together, neither speaking, both processing the magnitude of this news. The pregnancy progressed beautifully. Robbie glowed with health and happiness, her body changing in ways that Mike found fascinating and beautiful. He attended every appointment, asked endless questions, read books about fetal development with the same intensity Austin brought to his studies. The twins were excited, Austin already planning how to teach his future sibling about books and science, Matthew declaring he would protect the baby from anything scary. 6 months into the pregnancy, news came that Callahan had been sentenced to prison for securities fraud. The investigation had uncovered a web of illegal activity spanning years, and the judge showed no mercy. Robbie felt nothing but relief that her son's biological father could no longer threaten their stability. "How do I tell them?" she asked Mike the night after the sentencing. "How do I explain that their father is going to prison? We tell them the truth age-appropriately, that he did something illegal, that there are consequences for breaking laws, that it doesn't change how we feel about them." They sat the twins down together, explaining carefully and honestly. Austin processed with his usual seriousness, asking questions about justice and punishment and rehabilitation. Matthew's response was simpler. "Good, now he can't hurt Mama anymore." Robbie pulled both boys into hugs, grateful for their resilience, grateful that they had found safety early enough that Callahan's poison hadn't destroyed them. The baby arrived on a perfect autumn morning, the kind of day that felt blessed by the universe. Labor was long but manageable, Mike staying beside Robbie the entire time, coaching her breathing and telling her how strong she was and how much he loved her. When their daughter finally emerged, crying lustily and waving tiny fists, Robbie wept with joy and exhaustion. Mike cut the cord with shaking hands, overwhelmed by the reality of this new life they had created together. "She's perfect," he said, voice breaking. "She looks exactly like you." They named her Hope Catherine Wilson. Hope for the future they were building. Catherine to honor the woman who made it possible. Wilson because they were family now, completely and permanently. The twins met their sister with reverence and excitement. Austin held her with careful gentleness, murmuring to her about all the things he would teach her. Matthew kissed her forehead and declared himself her official protector from anything scary, which was everything according to his dramatic personality. Robbie watched Mike with their daughter, seeing him fall completely in love with another tiny human who had captured his heart instantly. She watched him balance 3 children with patience and humor, dividing his attention so everyone felt valued. She watched him become the father she always dreamed her children would have. "I need to do something," Robbie told Mike one evening after Hope was asleep and the twins were in bed. "I need to visit Catherine's grave. I need to thank her properly." They went together the next day, leaving the children with Margot. Mike carried flowers while Robbie carried Hope in a wrap against her chest. They stood before Catherine's headstone, and Robbie spoke the words she had been composing for months. "I never knew you, but I know you were extraordinary because Mike loved you. Thank you for loving him enough to let him go. Thank you for making him promise to live, even though he spent 15 years breaking that promise. Thank you for the man he became because of you, the man I get to love now." Tears streamed down Robbie's face. "I promise to take care of him. I promise to love him completely. I promise to give him the family you wanted for him, but couldn't give yourself." Mike's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her head. "She would have loved you, Robbie, and she would have loved our children. I'm certain of that." They stayed a while longer, both saying silent goodbyes to a woman who had shaped their journey without ever meeting Robbie. When they finally left, it felt like closure, like the last piece of the past, finally finding peace. Years passed in a blur of birthday parties and school events and family dinners that were loud and messy and absolutely perfect. Austin grew into a thoughtful teenager, passionate about architecture, already talking about college and career with the certainty of someone who knew exactly what they wanted. Matthew channeled his fierce energy into athletics and activism, becoming the kind of person who fought for justice with the same intensity he had once fought against bedtime. Hope grew into a bright, happy child who had inherited her mother's strength and her father's kindness. She adored her brothers, following them around with devotion that was both adorable and occasionally annoying to teenage boys who wanted privacy. Mike and Robbie's marriage deepened with time, weathering normal conflicts and challenges with the foundation of love they had built during crisis. They learned each other completely, accepting flaws alongside strengths, choosing each other daily even when daily was difficult. One evening during Hope's 5th birthday party, Mike stood on the terrace watching chaos unfold below, children running through gardens, Margot supervising cake cutting, Vivienne laughing with Isla, Sterling attempting to teach Austin chess strategies, while Matthew tried to convince everyone to play capture the flag instead. Robbie joined him, slipping her hand into his with the ease of shared history. "Happy?" "Deliriously," Mike replied. "Though I think Matthew just convinced Sterling to abandon chess for games in the dark with questionable rules." "That sounds exactly right." Robbie leaned her head on his shoulder. "I was thinking about that night I showed up at your gates. How terrified I was. How certain I was that my life was over. And now I'm standing in a garden watching our daughter celebrate her birthday, surrounded by family that loves us, married to a man who makes me believe in fairy tales." She looked up at him. "Thank you for opening the gates, Mike. Thank you for letting me in. Thank you for collapsing there." Mike kissed her forehead. "Best storm of my life." They stood together watching their family, both grateful for the journey that brought them here, both excited for the future still unfolding. The estate that had been a mausoleum now rang with laughter and life. The man who spent 15 years honoring a promise to the dead had learned to live for those who were alive. As the sun set and party lights twinkled to life, Mike pulled Robbie close and whispered the truth they had both learned through pain and healing and extraordinary love. Some promises are meant to be broken, and in their breaking we discover what promises actually matter. Robbie smiled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, surrounded by the noise of children and family and a life she had stopped believing was possible. What promises matter? The ones we make to the living, the ones we make to ourselves. The promise to choose joy over grief, love over fear, hope over despair. Mike looked down at his wife, at the family they had built from ruins and desperation and a rainstorm that changed everything. Those are the promises worth keeping. And surrounded by everything they had created together, everything they had survived to build, Mike Wilson finally understood what Catherine had known all along, that the greatest honor to the dead is living fully for them, loving completely despite them, and building a future worthy of the second chances that grace sometimes provides to those brave enough to accept them.